Hey guys, welcome to this week's how-to. For this week's Warhammer Conquest, we got the second part of the easy to build Redemptor Dreadnaught. Now, I've already got one of these, but I'm going to put this one together just to see exactly how easy to build they are. This will be my second one, so it's primarily to show you guys how easy and or difficult to build they are. For this, you'll need a Dreadnaught to build, some glue. This is Revel, but the GW stuff is good. A knife for cutting things, not cutting fingers. A pair of clips and a file. Now you might wonder why I'm using a nail file. That's because this is an old one, but that's because they don't have the striations that some of the files have, which on some of the plastic I found gives me less tool marks, particularly on the plastic we're getting with Conquest, because where it's a tad more brittle, I'm finding it seems to be leaving me with a few more tool marks, whereas if I just file this corner down here, hopefully you can see it's fairly minimalist on tool marks there. Army Painter do a bunch of files that look very similar to this with their finish. They look nothing like nail files, obviously they look like proper files. They kind of look like a sanded finish, and I've seen people file steel with them, so they're actually fairly strong as well. There are a couple of other places that do files like that. Army Painter is just the only one I know off the top of my head. A lot of other places do the files where they have lines etched across metal or carved across metal. Those files are perfectly good. I'm just finding that, as I say, for the slightly more brittle plastic that we're getting with this, these leave slightly less tool marks. So it's up to you guys. Right, so let's look at what we've got. We can see that we have some legs here and some legs here. We can also see we've got a foot here and a foot here. So let's start from the ground up. There are instructions to build this, but I'm going to build this without instructions because in theory it's easy to build and I shouldn't need them. And unlike the others, the other easy to build kits, there is only one set of this, so you really don't have to worry about marrying up the different torsos with each other, like you do with, for example, the easy to build Space Marine set. This is, and should be, fairly straightforward. Let's take this off. I'm going to be real careful on it, because, you know, I like thumbs. If you're worried about cutting too deep, you can use the back just to scrape off bits. Now, I'm going to use the base to give me something to stand on, but for now, I'm just going to dry fit the feet. And the reason for that is it allows me to move and fiddle them around if later on I find the position isn't to my liking. And you can kind of hear with the kind of sharper snap you get in the plastic with the Conquest kits is not quite the same as the plastic you get with the GW kits as standard. I'm finding similar stuff with, for example, the kits you're getting in the starter sets where they're pre-coloured, where Dark Imperium, everything was already blue and green. It was a similar kind of plastic. It is, however, substantially better than some of the plastic we were picking up from the Japanese scenery kits, such as the Giants or like Magical Sphere from AOS, where that plastic was just god awful. It didn't stick, it didn't bend, it didn't give. If you wanted to move it, you had to boil it. This stuff, nowhere near that bad. As I say, slightly different. You've got to be slightly more careful with it. As I say, where it doesn't give quite so much, you can end up slipping and cutting more, and it seems to show the tool marks up just a little more, which is why, as I say, I'm using this file. Worth noting, this isn't actually my wife's nail file. It's a random nail file I've had, God knows, years now. I picked up with pretty much this idea in mind, that for some higher quality models like resin and that, it would leave less tool marks. And I've never bothered to replace it with something better because I've never had to. But as I say, there are several makes of file out there that also basically have a sanded finish as opposed to a striated finish, meaning that they leave less tool marks and they make it much less obvious when you filed something down, which, you know, isn't actually that important unless it matters to you. For things like Golden Demon and stuff like that, painting competitions where people are going to be looking up close to your models, very important. For your average army, it doesn't massively matter. And bear in mind, I'm not saying it doesn't make a difference. It does make a difference. You can see it. But you don't need to have it to that precise level. And this is something that's worth noting with a lot of stuff. You only need to do it to the level that makes you happy. There are some guys, and I am probably one of them, that spend days painting models when you could easily get the same model painted in a few hours. Ooh, I've left that bit on top there. Let me just get that. There are a lot quicker ways of doing things, and there are a lot of ways of doing things where you don't really have to worry about it. So just because somebody like me spends a bit too long on a model, it doesn't mean you have to. It's only meant to be good enough to make you happy. Anything after I'm happy with that model and I think it looks good is personal choice. Oh, worth noting that these actually have L and R on the inside to say which is the left and which is the right. I'm not sure why it makes a difference, but apparently it does. Oh. Now you can see here I've had to wiggle these. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to look at positioning these in a way that makes me happy. And I'm not going to move too much. Now, this is the rear foot, so I'm going to splay this out slightly. And as you can see, while this foot is flat, this foot is actually raised as if it's stepping up. So yeah, that's cool. If you want to do any massive modifications, such as altering the knee joint so it's treading on something, that's the foot that's going to look best treading on something. Now we're just going to put that bit aside. Next bit is going to be the torso. I personally like to build my models from the ground up. As with this, if I have the opportunity, I will dry fit it on the base. So I can alter it and fiddle with it if I need to. But if necessary, I'll just glue it down to the base to hold it in place. But I just tend to find building it from the ground up is the way that makes me happy. Some models, they just make more sense to build from the center or the chest or the torso, just because of the way they're built. But if I can, I tend to build it from the ground up. If nothing else, it gives me a freestanding base to hold the model by. If I'm not using anything else. And the GW painting handle, just as an example, of which I have one now. Yay! Grips intentionally onto the 30mm bases and the 25mm bases. Cool, blimey, just feel that snap. That is definitely a different plastic. Ooh. It's worth also noting that a lot of the non-easy to build Dreadnaught is built in pretty much the same way as the easy to build Dreadnaught. You just have a lot more options and a lot more possibilities where things can fit, and in theory where things can go wrong. Always remember to put that lid back on, because those needles, once they clog up, they're a pain to get unclogged. Except with fire. Fire is good. If you want to see how to unclog them, there's a video on this channel which will tell you what to do with a needle like this when it gets clogged up. And it's cool because it involves using fire. And tiny, tiny explosions. I like tiny explosions. I like. And slightly bore out there. Apologies, casual racism. It's not usually my thing. Sadly, my Tourette's does not always allow me to come at you. Modulate itself. You'd be amazed the shit that comes out of my mouth when I'm stressed. And oh no, I broke one. No, I didn't, it just slipped. There you go. She ain't gonna take it. EA ain't gonna make it. Never mind. We ain't gonna take it. No, we ain't gonna take it. We ain't gonna take it anymore. I don't know why that's in my head, it just is. That does not sound nice when you cut it. You may well be wondering why I cut my thumb. I just find it gives me a lot of control, but it is a stupid way to cut. It really, really is. I thoroughly recommend not learning to cut this way. It is dumb, it is stupid, and you will slice the crap out of your thumb on more than one occasion. I sometimes think that if I were taken in for torture, I would cry like a baby. But if they tortured just the tips of my fingers, I would probably be able to endure it, just because I don't have much feeling there anymore. That's not actually true. Various areas of my fingers have had nerves severed through cutting with knives. It's quite weird sometimes. I sometimes think things like that, and then I realise they're idiotic. But that doesn't stop me sometimes thinking them. Sorry, just a little dry thing there so I could see it. I'll just realise the bits of it still need trimming. I'm not sure exactly where it's going to glue, so just adding some general bits hither and thither just to make sure I get plenty of contact on that one. There we go. And there we can see that we've got the torso. And again, you can fiddle with the torso, dry fit it at first just to see where it's going. Now, this guy's stepping up with this first, so I think he's heading this way. So that's what I'm going to do there. You can leave this straight on, but it's got two little togs there and a little hole there. So it's designed to be just easier to turn and to hold it when it turns. So let's put that. What am I doing? I'm gluing the wrong thing. And two little togs there. Sorry, I'm looking through the camera so much, my brain got confused there. Two little togs there, just focusing on a tiny bit. Wow. So I'm just going to sit that little dude facing that way. Now I'm going to build the arms separately. That's because you can see how cool they look when you build them, and it gives you a better idea of any positioning you might want to do. Which, in all fairness, isn't going to be much on this model. Most of the positions on the easy to build are pretty much completely pre-dictated. There is a little wiggle room, just not a massive amount. God, jeez, listen to that snap. Oh, my leg. I'm just going to put those down for a second. Bring this up. Sorry, just to put the tools down there for a second because my phone was running low and I just needed to plug it into a charger, which I had forgotten to do at the beginning of the video. But here we go, just... You may notice there are holes and bits that stick out, and I tend to glue the whole side. That's because I just like to drop a little bit in those holes. I tend to think of it's a fairly easy way to get them to glue. You can see there's one. It's huge. You can literally hold my little finger. When my child was born, when my children were born, their hands were often small enough to hold my little finger. So this is almost the size of a baby's hand. It's absurdly big. I remember miniatures were actually 29mm. Some of you may be saying, does he not mean 28mm? And no, he doesn't. He means 29mm. GW deliberately made their models a little bigger so that they would look bigger compared to other models, because their initial models were meant to be Space Marines, and as such they wanted them to be a little bigger and a little meatier. It also meant that you couldn't really transfer other things over in scale, because they were not just 29mm but 29mm heroic scale, so their hands and heads were bigger. Now this had the advantage of, as I say, meaning that you had to, if you started buying GW, you'll only keep buying GW. It also made their models, when standing next to other models, look bigger, look cooler, and look meatier. And thirdly, and this is actually possibly the most important bit from a customer standpoint, sorry, twitching there. Thirdly, and this is probably biggest and most important from a customer standpoint, it made the hands and the heads easier to paint and fit. So it meant that their models looked even cooler, because the heads that you painted were much better and much more detailed, and when you focus on things, those are the bits you look at. Little history lesson there. If you look back at those 29mm models, they were considered slightly oversized for the time, deliberately so. You know, their guns were huge compared to, for example, any historic games guns. Their models' heads were bigger. It made them look meatier and more heroic, which is why they called it heroic scale. It let you focus on the face and the details more. But even those models, compared to the models of today, are minuscule. You end up with, until you end up with brutes like this. And this isn't even like a super heavy, this is just a Dreadnaught. It's massive. And I, for one, frankly, quite like it. Oh, there's a bit of trim there that I've missed. I like the size, I like the meatiness, I like the way they look, particularly as they've increased the size of the Space Marine ones, so that they look, well, they look more like the scale they should look. These guys are always supposed to be bigger, meaner, badder than their non-Space Marine counterparts, and finally they really do. The only sort of downside is if you're there you are. If you're buying more plastic, you're probably spending more money. Okay, and there's one last bit which I almost forgot. The barrels. Again, this bit, as with almost every bit you'll have seen, is keyed in, so it only really should go in one way. So just let me get that there. There, you can see that's got a little key there, and if you look down the end there, you can see that's got a little nodule there. And they're basically to make sure that you can't do it wrong. which weirdly enough I find doesn't really make them always easier to build. But I suppose it sounds a lot better than harder to cock up. And you probably couldn't put harder to cock up on a model. So not without offending someone. Possibly your customers. Come here, you. When dealing with the small bits like this, be careful and ideally do it somewhere with a single coloured floor, or a fairly single coloured floor. I'm just going to take the camera and show you my floor. My floor is nice and grey, which, as you can imagine, when I drop grey plastic, motherfucker to find. But when I drop blue like this, actually really easy. There we go. There we can see that fitted on. Now I'm just going to add some glue here. And we can see again, oh, sorry, just let that focus. We've got a little knock there and a little knock there again. These guys are keyed in. Now these guys, fortunately, are meant to flatten out. Oh, dang it, still missing bits of stuff. It is reasonably late at night. I have just got home from work, so you'll have to forgive me if I'm occasionally having to go back and catch them. Now, in this case, I am going to be pointing it... I think I'm going to keep it straight. You've got basically up and down. In theory, you could do something weird. For example, I could go, ha-ha, woot woot, and pose him like that. But I'm not going to. I'm just going to pose him in a basic standard pose. He's turning like that, he's firing. And there he is. Now, I'm going to be cheeky and just... Sorry, just make sure that's in. I'm just going to run some glue around the bottom here and rely on capillary attraction just to get it underneath the toes and that. If you know what capillary attraction is, put down a cup of coffee and watch as it gets sucked, as the spilled coffee gets sucked all the way around the bottom. Two flat surfaces with next to no space with them tend to suck in liquids. That's actually how bits of your body work. They use capillary attraction to suck blood around. Isn't that cool, boys and girls? But you can see, one easy to build Dreadnaught, built easily and quickly. Okay. Have a nice night, guys. Hope this is helpful to some of you. Hi guys, hope you enjoyed that video, and if you did, remember to like and subscribe to my channel. I'm also on Facebook and Twitter. Not sure why, but I am. So if you like it, see me there, and please tell your friends. Thanks very much. Bye.